A lot of times when I post about climate change, I will end up getting a message like this. Didn't Al Gore say that New York City would be underwater by the year 2000? Well, I think that they're referring to An Inconvenient Truth, that documentary that Gore did back in 2006. But it was 2006, so there's no way that he was making a prediction for the year 2000. Either way, that film is regularly used by deniers as proof that climate change is a hoax. So we figured, why not, nearly 20 years after the film debuted, we go in and see what was right and what was wrong. And what better place to do it here, the Hall of Earth at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. What you'll learn here is that science is complex. It requires quite a bit of nuance, and that's really hard when you try to make it entertaining. But I'm gonna try. Wait, did he really say that New York City was going underwater? Well, let's go to the tape. I believe they're referring to this simulation that does indeed show inundation all the way to the World Trade Center site. Now, this simulation was if the Greenland ice sheet broke apart, but it hasn't. Was everything that Al Gore said in the film perfect? No. Did it have a lot of solid science behind it? Yeah. Do you remember when Al Gore got on that cherry picker and he went up to show how quickly CO2 was rising? Well, back then it was 380 parts per million. Now we're at 427 parts per million. But the top of his cherry picker, it was about, by an estimate, 600 parts per million. He said that would have happened in 50 years. Columbia University says that'll happen by the end of the century, so he was about 50 years early. That said, a majority of scientists agree the trend when it comes to CO2 is troubling, no matter how fast. So how do we know how much CO2 today is versus the past? Well, this helps a lot. This is called an ice core, and each one of those little bubbles that they pull from hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, measures CO2. Number two, Gore says that the snows of Kilimanjaro will be gone in a decade. Well, it still snows on Kilimanjaro, so that was wrong. But the trend for them is down. And actually in 2024, they had their lowest snowfall on record at Kilimanjaro. But that's not the only glacier in the world. Since 2000, global warming has led to the disappearance of thousands of glaciers around the Earth, and that's according to the UN Environmental Program. See that? The Arctic sea ice minimum extent down 12.2% per decade since 1979. Well, number three got Gore in trouble too, because when he was talking about Antarctic sea ice and sea level rise, Gore had said, quote, "That's why the citizens of these Pacific nations had all had to evacuate to New Zealand." But there was no documented climate migration from that. So you see that? Sea level up 9 inches around the world since 1880. And there are so many reasons why climate migration happens. Sea level rise is just part of it. Look at Isle de Jean-Charles in Louisiana. Their land is sinking, the sea is rising, and in concert, they've had to find a new home. There are several other little nuances that Gore missed, but those are the big ones. And there are way more that he got hauntingly right, and actually are nothing compared to what we know today. He points out that the top 10 warmest years on record were in the 14 years before his documentary. But now, none of them are in the top 10. The top 10 most recent years are the hottest on record. In An Inconvenient Truth, he talks about oceans being warmer and therefore more destructive hurricanes. Well, our oceans just keep warming, and actually unprecedented levels the last couple of years, and we know that those have aided rapid intensification. Take the Climate Shift Index, which is a new tool we can use, and it told us that the warm waters that helped Hurricane Beryl, rapidly intensify were 400 times more likely because of human climate change. Then Gore referenced coral reefs and said back then that these guys were seeing a species loss 1,000 times natural variability. That still stands today, and it's actually much worse. The last couple of years we've had very hot oceans, and we've seen from the UN Environmental Program, they say that so much is being lost that by the end of the century, a quarter of marine life will be gone. In An Inconvenient Truth, there were parts that were incomplete, overstated, or not general enough. But far more were right on. Bottom line, the rate of warming since the mid-20th century is unprecedented. Since Al Gore's film, we've had nearly 20 years more of evidence, and it all points to the same thing. Our planet is warming. We are one of the main drivers, and we can make a change that could help that.